this is an outdoor video for a change. I thought I'd get away from the keyboard and show you a bit of the UK in March, just coming out of winter. It's still pretty cold. So there you go. What we're going to talk about today, or I'm going to talk about, some of the different aspects of coding and web scraping, and thinking about what to learn and where to focus your effort. And also I'm going to talk about how not to make money, how you can spend your time doing things which don't earn you enough money and are not profitable. Let's begin with some real world examples. So, starting with full on 100% web scraping. The first trick, or the first thing to do, is do your research. Research the site. It may be that the site that you're being asked to scrape is a non-starter. How do you mean a non-starter? Well, does the site require authentication? Does it require a specific geographic location? If it does, then either you need to get the client to very quickly give you their VPN details, static IP address information, connection details, and you want to get in, survey it, get out, do the quote, move on. And if you get the work, then do it as quickly as you can before anything changes, before you get disconnected, blah de blah de blah. So if you check the job, it looks okay, you can do it using their connection, just go ahead, do it as quickly as possible. Which brings me on to the next thing, which is writing a scraper, or writing a spider in Python for yourself, or do you write it for your customer? No. If you write it for yourself, that's fine, but that then may possibly mean that you need to subscribe to a paid proxy, or use your own VPN. Using a VPN for web scraping doesn't really gain you much benefit, other than if there's certain geographic restrictions. So a paid proxy, if you're just starting out, do you really want to be paying $30, $50, $100 a month for a paid proxy, and potentially you're only picking up 1, 2, 3 jobs a month? The paid proxy is basically going to wipe out all of your profit, especially if you only actually need the paid proxy for 1 or 2 jobs. So, best thing to do is suggest that the client buys a subscription to paid proxy. I've done this recently with a client, and they've actually subscribed to Scraper API, which has worked well. However, if you go for a cheaper package, or the cheapest package, even the Scraper API makes its calls from the US, which he happened to be in a different continent, and other than the US, outside of Europe, and he wanted to be scraping a site in Europe. So going via the US was actually not the best idea, and it transpired that he actually needed to connect via a VPN, get a European IP address, and then scrape the real estate site based in Europe using Scraper API. But because his VPN was initiating the connection, he was going via I can't talk, my mouth's cold. He was going via the European VPN, via European Scraper API to scrape European real estate site. And he was doing all of this from outside of Europe. So Sometimes you will need a combination of a paid proxy and a VPN, and to be honest, a VPN's a good idea anyway, so I'd recommend VPN. Just get that, because €30, $30, 30 quid a year, it's worth every penny for numerous reasons. I won't go into those on here. Get a VPN, paid proxy, question mark. Do you get it or not? I would recommend, if you're only starting out, then you suggest your client, if they're going to be doing a lot of scraping, and potentially if they're doing real estate or scraping CVs online, which is another common task to do with web scraping, or e-commerce websites, Alibaba, whatever. Yeah, if they mean business, if they balk at spending 30 or 50 euros for a month, then probably they're not really clients that you want to be working for, because they sound like their budget is too small. Just politely inform them that if they're not going to pay for the API, the paid proxy, scraper API, then yeah, you can't really continue to do work for them. Next, spending a lot of time on fixing problems that are not related to your ability as a coder. And I've had this quite recently. The problem has been the client has access to a secure site, and understandably they're reluctant, or it's not, I'm in total agreement that I don't want to jeopardize their login, which is kind of, it's a once in a lifetime login, and if you mess that up, then you're not going to get another one. So they have that login, and they log in, and 1 week when we're scraping the target site, we're using Selenium, and 1 week the selectors will be called, for argument's sake, they'll be called selector 55, selector 56, selector 57. Everything's working on Friday. On Monday, you come back to it, and the code's broken, the code doesn't work. Okay, so you, after a little bit of head scratching, you then remember that you've had it before where the selectors have changed name, and I can only describe this as being caused by a pool of servers, and possibly some of the servers have a slightly different version of the web page, either an earlier or an older version of the web page. Where do we get to? Yeah, so the page, bad hair day. So, because, and it's starting to rain now as well, brilliant. Where do we get to? Right, because the page changes, I suspect, because I've got some knowledge of load balancers, big IPF5s, aka application delivery controllers, and having studied them, I know you can have a pool of servers, and which server you hit when you make your request is dependent upon, they can either be called round robin, it can be weighted, or you can have something called persistence. Now, there's no persistence involved here, so if it was persistent, you would keep getting the same server each time you made a request, and you might have persistence over an hour or over 24 hours or so on. Anyway, if the page changes, then your selectors are different, so your scraper doesn't work. So, God, it's really cooking up a right storm there. So when you're This is outrageous. I wasn't really expecting this kind of cut. Depending on which server you hit. So same IP address. It's just when your request meets their server or their load balancer, it will direct you to a different server which could have a different version of their HTML. So what you need to do is, long story short, is spend a bit of time, and you need to make their you need to do a regular expression which checks for something which is a constant. So as long as you've got a constant on that page, preferably a number which you're looking up, so if you've got a page which keeps changing the IDs of the selectors, what you need to do is you need to have like a baseline lookup. So if you've got a product or a customer ID or something, say it's ABC123, what you do is you look that up, and then you have a regular expression, and then you want to do a search. You want to search for that, and if it's changed, then you want to pick out the new value, and then proceed with your code using that new value. The idea is fairly logical, but actually executing it can take a little bit of time, just to get the regular expression right and to obviously test it. And because you're testing it on the clients, using the client's login, then you need to kind of you can either screen share or update the code and then just get them to test it, but obviously don't test it too much or too frequently and compromise their access. So yeah, to summarize, paid proxy, get the customer to pay for it. And number two, if you're doing something with secure login, get their VPN details. And number three, if you suspect that the web page is changing and the selectors are breaking, then create a regular expression to check using a constant. So you have a constant product number or constant personnel ID to look up, and because you're using a constant, you'll know what the expected output is. And if it's not that, then you need to search for the new selector, and you can do that using regular expression, a regular expression. And once you've done that, you can carry on with the rest of your code using the updated selector. So what you could have is you could just have a placeholder selector called selector 99, and then when you run your code, it goes through and checks the lookup on person, your member of staff called Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, and you know that you're looking for a value which is age 50. And if you get an error with your code, the selector's changed. So then you use a regular expression, you search for the number, you search for the name Mr. Smith, and then you do a regular expression, look ahead or look behind, and then you get the value of the new selector. So instead of using selector 99, it might be called selector 56, and then you proceed with your code. So I hope that makes sense. I can't really demonstrate all of these things I'm talking about because confidentiality, or the last thing you ever want to do is write code for a customer and then expose any of their logins, passwords, anything on GitHub or Stack Overflow or anywhere else like that. So, or YouTube. So you might, I will always grey out anything which is particular to the customer. And just another tip, if you're ever putting code onto GitHub, if it's got, well, the best thing to do is never to put the password on there, even if it's a private repo. So you can use load.env if you're using Python. Then you have .env file, which is just a text file. It's not a Python file, and then you just put the details in there, and then when your Python code runs, then you can get those values out of the .env file. And when you upload your code, you only upload your code to GitHub, and the env file stays on your machine. I've done a couple of videos before on that, and I'll put a link in the description as usual. So yeah, that's kind of the 3 tips for today, and my hands are about to freeze because it is raw. I think they've gone orange and purple, so yeah, if you're in the southern hemisphere, you're lucky. So there we go. It's a windy afternoon in UK, and we've discussed changing selectors and using a regular expression to search for the updated selector. We've talked about that the client pays for a paid proxy, e.g. scraper API, and the other thing is just get yourself a VPN, 30 euros a year, 30 quid a year, $30. You get one, your client gets one, everybody gets a VPN. I can't recommend a VPN strongly enough. And I'm not selling VPNs, I'm not making any money by that, and I'm not recommending a particular one. Although if you watch every single one of my videos, you might find out which VPN provider I use, but they all work well. Unless you're particularly doing anything very naughty on Tor browsers or anything, then I think there's probably about 10 good ones that you can choose from. NordVPN, Private VPN, I can't remember all the others, but there you go. Anyway, I hope that's been interesting, and probably next time I'll be indoors and it'll be warmer. But for now, let's just have another look at the countryside and some white fluffy clouds and a little bit of sunshine at sunset in the afternoon. And I hope you've learned, or at least not learned, but it's given you some food for thought to think about dynamically extracting selectors, getting a VPN, and asking your client to pay for a paid proxy if they are committed to their project. Or if you do hundreds of spiders a month, well, then there's not a problem, and you probably make enough money to pay for your own. But it's always better if they pay for it, because then if one day it stops working, then it's their problem, not yours. Anyway,